On behalf of the City of Springfield, I'll open the meeting for Springfield City Council.
You guys.
And on behalf of the Lane County Board of Commissioners, I will open the meeting.
Okay. The first item on our agenda today is a public hearing, transplant and metro plan amendments to extend transplant planning year from 2015 to 27 and remove completed projects per LCDC approved work plan. And I will now open the city's public hearing.
At this time, I'll open the City of Springfield's public hearing.
Let the Board of Commissioners public hearing be open.
Okay. And so now our city's transportation planner, Kurt Yider, will introduce the topic.
Thank you very much. I drew what we call on the staff level the short straw. We take turns, but as I'm speaking on behalf of the planners and transportation folks from all the jurisdictions. Your other staff are here and some legal counsel, so if you have questions, we hope to cover. This is a public hearing, and there's sign-up sheets if people would like to address the joint elected officials, so if anyone wants to sign up for that while I'm speaking. I'll provide a very brief, broad overview, and I hope the written material suffices to do that. Glad to answer questions when it's over. You may recall back in 2007, those of you that were on the body then, the Metropolitan Policy Committee adopted a new regional transportation plan, federal required transportation plan, which triggered state transportation planning rules that the locals either find findings of consistency between TransPlan and the newly adopted regional transportation plan, or amend TransPlan to become consistent. So for a variety of reasons, we chose to amend our regional transportation plan, TransPlan, to become more consistent. But because of the timing with local land use and transportation plans being updated, we took a work program to the Land Conservation and Development Commission that gave a multiple-year, sequential, logical series of events that would lead towards the updated transportation system plans and land use plan. That work program was adopted in 2008 by LCDC, and it's attached to your packets as item B. One of the first amendments that was requested through all this seemed relatively simple at the time. One was to remove those projects from the project list that were already completed, so the project list would better match the federal plan. And the other was to update the planning year, what we sometimes call the horizon year, at which time we expected the planned population for the region to be reached. When TransPlan was adopted, that we projected the population of 296,500, which is TransPlan population, would be reached in the year 2015. We have been growing more slowly, and what we are using now is the more recently adopted counties coordinated population projections. Using those, we now project we would reach our planned population in the year 2027. So the ordinances before you have three amendments. One is it's a text amendment in TransPlan, or a regional transportation plan, to extend the planning year from 2015 to 2027, to amend the project list to remove completed projects, and similarly and concurrently to amend the Metro Plan so that the Metro Plan reflects the same changes that are contained in the TransPlan. During the course of this process, we had gone through Planning Commission, and we started with safe harbor population projections, and then the county coordinated population came. To bring them all into sync, last August, the joint elected officials agreed to open the process so that new evidence could be considered at this time during this hearing. This allows the coordinated county population to be brought in as new evidence, because that was not what was heard originally at the Planning Commission level. I'd also point out that during the interim year, our transportation planning staffs re-reviewed the project lists and the amendments there and refined that slightly from what was proposed at the Planning Commission level. That mostly has to do with definitions of the projects, or some of the projects were merged in the federal plan, and it's to still allow funding to fund some bicycle and pedestrian type improvements. That's my overview. I'm glad to answer questions now or after the public testimony.
So at this time, we would have people speak, except we have no one who's signed up. If anyone wished to speak? Seeing no one, is there any other staff comments?
I would point out that we're not really expecting any action tonight, or this afternoon. So if closing the hearings, the county has to go through a second reading. I don't know if Commissioner Handy's carrying this. Do you have the script? Or if there's a date to which to extend to the second reading. And then we'll bring back ordinances for adoption at a later date.
Okay. So are there any questions that councilors or board members wish to ask of staff? See any?
Oh.
Yes.
As I was reading through this document, the West Eugene Parkway kept popping up, and it bothered me that it was still in this, in the TSP, the transportation, our local transportation plan, or trans plan, and especially since it had been removed by MPC already from the federal regional transportation plan, RTP, and all the funding had been removed for it, and so that's no longer available, and so it made no sense that it was still in here. And I was trying to figure out if we could remove it in this process as well, but essentially to remove it, and it is essentially removed. It really is just a shell. Can't rely on it for development. There are no funding available for it for construction. So, but I ran into numerous process and legal hoops that need to be jumped through in order to delete it. And it wouldn't be deleted from our local TSP until mid-2012, another 2 years from now. In part because we have to be consistent with the transportation planning rule and replace it with something that would deal with it, which is what the whole transportation planning process is all about. So I couldn't delete it, but I found out we could do two things. And I'm going to bring this up at City Council in the next meeting or two. And what we can do, though, is we can amend the description of the West Eugene Parkway in here to say that it was removed by the MPC from the RTP on such and such a date, and that it basically all of the funding for construction has been removed from the MTIP, and there is no funding for construction available for this project. So we can amend the description, which makes it pretty clear that the project's dead. And then also that moving it up in our process in the TSP, we could move it up in our queue of things to work through with our consultants as we walk through our TSP analysis, so that it can be dealt with earlier in the process than later in the process. So just want to let you know that was that's kind of a heads up. Lane County has to, I think, approve those amendments too, because the project also goes into the regional transportation plan, and Eugene Council does, but Springfield does. So not even appropriate to necessarily bring it up here, but so I just want to let you know what I found out and how I think probably proceed. At least that's the way I think I would proceed.
Thank you. So at this time, we would normally close the public hearing and the public record. Is there any council or board member who wishes to hold the record open for written testimony or to continue the hearing to another time? I don't see anyone. So I'm going to announce the record hearing and record are closed. Springfield minutes?
Springfield City Council, on behalf of this council, will announce that the hearing is closed.
Before I close the hearing, I know I have some remarks I'd like to have on the record. I'll ask the other commissioners, do you have any comments or questions? Seeing none? Okay. So there's some questions embedded in here, but given that we have limited time today, I'll just read these comments and have them in the record. Perhaps we could have staff reply to the questions in here later. I'm going to reference attachment B. I have 3 points that I want to make. One is about the analysis and trends from the last 15 years that do not seem to be here. I'd like to make a couple comments about the financially constrained list and also about the performance measures. So first, starting with the work plan, it is the blueprint for the staff efforts and elected officials' decisions down the road. The work plan is clear, but the progress towards completing the enumerated tasks is less so. The staff materials included in the 2-page work plan, referenced attachment B, do not clarify which work plans are complete, which are partially complete, in other words, what percentage complete, what remains to be done in the actual timeline, if different from the stated timeline for doing so. The LCDC conditions associated with the work plan are not provided in this packet as far as I'm concerned. I think that should be attached here. The packet of proposed transplant and metro plan amendments are seemingly without any analysis or consideration of actual on-the-ground progress over the last 15 years, nor do we appear to be on schedule according to the work plan. Some examples of this lack of analysis or consideration of the on-the-ground progress of the last 15 years. 15 years have passed. Highway, road, pedestrian, bike, and neighborhood projects have been built. Development patterns have changed or not. Yet the proposed amendments say nothing about what, if any, progress has been realized towards our benchmarks and performance measures through implementation of the planned projects and development patterns. Rather, where we were planned to be in 2015 is merely pushed out 12 years to 2027. Even if the projects and development patterns realized over the past 15 years haven't been getting us to where we said we wanted to be, we just don't have any analysis of that. The projects removed from the financially constrained lists aren't accounted for in the bottom line financial constraint of each project's category. In other words, we don't really have adjustments to subtotals, to running totals. For example, with various projects, we know they come in either above or below the estimated project cost. Where are those adjustments shown? In here, I'm not seeing any of that. By leaving out an analysis of the financial constraint for the year 2027, is staff implying that the reasonable expectation for funding for the highway and local roads, transit, PED projects and such through 2027 will be as originally expected for the year 2015? If not, why is there no analysis of the financial constraint out to the year, which is now 12 years out? I also want to reference Exhibit A, which is Ordinance 1272, the transplant. The only work that appears to have been done on the transplant update is the editing we're seeing scrawled out there, changing the plan horizon from 2015 to 2027. Some language edits to recognize the change to 2 separate UTPs. Some new language noting consistency between transplant and RTP. But what I do not understand how or believe that the trends expected for the year 2015 when the plan was adopted in 1995 will remain unchanged out to 2027. Where is the analysis to support this huge assumption?
Commissioner, we have a little issue here because we closed the hearing for the cities.
Yeah.
Prior to your making those comments. So those comments cannot be heard by us nor considered by us or even in the public record. So they should have happened prior to our closure of the hearing, because when we ask for comments or questions from council and commission, those are, our records are closed.
That's fine. Then I realize there may not be discussion to this, and so I'll just finish up. We'll close the hearing and comment on what you wish.
Did you already close the hearing?
I closed the city hearing. He
Yes.
closed the city hearing. He has not closed the.
Correct.
Madam Mayor, point of order.
Yes.
It's nice that he has all this information, but I know I came in late. Did we get any of this information passed out to us? He's making references to schedule, or attachments and all these other things, and we don't have any of that to go by. So we haven't, I haven't saw that.
Well, we're not supposed to be, I will restate what I just said, which
I
is
realize that, Madam Mayor.
that the information that he is currently imparting are happening after our hearing is closed and after Springfield's hearing is closed, so they are not part of our record and not part of our consideration.
Okay. I just want to make clear that we get all the attachments.
I'm just saying you didn't hear la la la.
Mayor?
Yes.
Point of order, do we put any of the final product into any jeopardy for hearing the things
I
now
don't
that
know
we've
the answer to that. Kurt, do you know any-
canceled this? Or Catherine?
Or Catherine?
No, I mean, the hearing, the record is the record. For Eugene and Springfield, you've closed the hearings, you've closed the records. So on appeal, there will be two separate records. Yeah, nightmare for us, but okay, it's fine.
Okay.
You're not, your actions today, or when you take action, is in no way jeopardized by this. If there's a record compiled for the appeal, these discussions just won't be included in it because you've closed the record for this ordinance.
Want to just
Thank you.
reopen?
Thank you, Mayor.
Want to reopen the hearings?
And if you did want to, you could just reopen your record, if that
Really?
was your desire. Eugene and Springfield could do that, reopen. If the county was going to get additional information in response to Commissioner's question, then you could entirely up to you.
No.
Or just,
And there is, even with the separate records, but the kind of third option that maybe muddies it more. Many of the issues that Commissioner Handy have raised are things that can be answered outside of this adoption process. So the amendments before you were intended to be an interim step, something to help bring our regional transportation plan more into compliance. Simple kind of housekeeping type amendments, while we were doing a more intensive overview and research and update of our local transportation plans and the regional transportation plan. So an option for the body too is to proceed with these amendments, and then the issues being raised by Commissioner Handy could be addressed outside of this adoption process and report back.
So, Commissioner Handy, in the interest of not having a variety of opinions on whether they should be opened or not opened, are you okay for reopening the two city hearing processes? Are you okay with your questions being passed on into the next part of the process?
Well, that would certainly be my intent, to circulate this to everyone, and I'm comfortable with just finishing up with our hearing being open. And if you want to open yours or not, then I'd go with your best wisdom on that.
Well, I just want to be clear that it's not so easy as that, because what that could dissolve into is one body saying, I want to keep it closed, another body saying they want it open, and it would be sort of unnecessarily conflictive. I'm looking for a way where you get your concerns into the mix, and we can just move the process forward with us all being on the same page. So I'm asking you if you would be willing to take all of those concerns that you have and put them into the, as I understand it from Kurt, into the next stage of the process.
The comments to staff, and staff to respond if you'd like to. or is it response to all the parties here?
But it just wouldn't be the responses would not be a basis for the decision and action on this particular ordinances. That's the way it would work. You went and closed the county's record now, before you received any information in response to the issues you raised. They wouldn't serve as a basis to inform you for this action, nor for the city of Eugene or Springfield, but you would get all the information for the next steps that are going to be occurring in the overall transplant update and the steps as we move forward.
Mayor, point of
Commissioner, do you have anything else? Just a minute. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
I was just going to finish up some comments on the record. That would be the most comfortable thing for the commissioners.
Okay. All right. I'm going to let him finish it because he was in the middle of it. And I'll call on you, and I'll call on you.
Point of order.
Yes?
Does that create a different record for the county than exists for the city?
If he gets answers or if he keeps talking. Yeah, he can finish up and keep talking. It doesn't cause that considerable.
Why don't we, let's just try this. Let's try to simplify it from the other way because this is getting awfully complicated. So unless I get a no from my counsel, I'm perfectly willing to reopen the hearing to finish hearing. But you've got to start over again if we do that, right?
No.
Just, no, we're okay. Just
I could submit the written comments into your record and just finish the minute I need.
Record's closed.
If he's reading from something, my understanding was you're reading from something that you could submit into the record.
Yeah.
So that's why it'll be okay. If you reopen the record now, he can finish up reading from what he's reading, have it submitted into the record, and then you could close the record. Then it would capture everything that you already spoke, as well as have the physical document in the record.
So I'm looking from the Eugene City Council only for a motion to reopen the record.
Move to reopen the record.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3. All those in opposition. 1, 2, 3.
Mayor, I think you had 1, 2, 3, 4.
Was there a 4?
Yeah, 4 in affirmative.
Okay, 4 in the, I guess I missed Andrea. Okay.
Did you
4 in
vote
the
in the
affirmative and 3 in opposition, so it passes and we will reopen the record.
I'm going to ask for a similar motion to, what I'd like to, I guess, do at this point in time is to show unity and partnership. So, do I have a motion? Do I have a motion from the council?
So moved. Second.
All right. So I have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify. 2, 3, 4. 4 in favor, opposed. 2 against. Okay, 4 in favor, 2 opposed.
So your record is also open?
Our record is open. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'll wrap up. Second point about the performance measures. Where is the analysis to support the huge assumptions about the shift of the time frame from 2015 to 27? Lastly, the performance measures. Per the work plan, again, back to attachment A, the first, second, and fourth quarters of 2009 were expected to address performance measures. I don't recall that this work has been completed. If it has or is in progress, staff should provide us with a hard copy report on the status of the performance measures. Do they need to be adjusted? If so, why? Are we on track towards meeting those benchmarks? And where is the analysis of this question? And what are we going to be doing differently between now and 2027, to mention 2015, if we are not on track? The performance measures are tied to project implementation. Projects scheduled to be completed by 2015, quite a few of them, large and small, have been completed. So how can future trends projected for 2015 be the same as expectations for 2027? The LTD route status changes have not been considered. We've had MX lines added. We've had bus service cut. Nor is the implementation of the projects in Springfield and Eugene. And lastly, where is the staff report regarding the impact of the nodal development on the plan's performance thus far. Considering the plan horizon, the original plan horizon was 2015, only 5 years out. Do the cities need to do better? Are they doing anything at all? Has there been any progress towards transplant performance measures and goals? Again, looking for the analysis here. Those conclude my comments. Do any of the other commissioners have any comments or questions? Okay, and I will submit these so folks have a chance to respond. I know we're on a tight timeline.
Are you closing the hearing?
Deputy, you ready?
You're,
I don't want to do that prematurely if you want to have some discussion now.
I don't think we want to have any discussion.
We just go to the record.
Okay. All right, I will close the Board of Commissioners public hearing.
Okay, and I will close the record hearing. The record hearing and record are closed for the City of Eugene.
Springfield will close the record and hearing, and I want to thank the council. Thank you for your indulgence.
Yes, Fred.
If the record is being closed, then as a member of the Springfield Council, I would like to get either a transcription of what Commissioner Handy's concerns are, so that if that's going to be part of the record, that we have that.
I believe he said he's going to make sure we have a copy.
We have that, so that can be an item of discussion.
Yes.
If there are going to be staff replies to his questions, will that be a part of the record as well?
Not the City of Eugene and City of Springfield now. I heard you close the hearing for the county. Is the record also closed for the county?
It's not the intent. We want to continue to have our discussion and vetting of this.
So to answer your question, Council Clark, no. The responses will be a part of the county's record and will not be a part of either of the city's record.
Now, Commissioner Handy, we tried very hard to get our reopen and get this into the record, and we have all voted to close the record. We would hope that you would be working with us on this too. And we'll get the answers through a different process, but they won't be on the record. Yes,
You're creating a dissimilar record
that's right.
That was my question.
in the three different bodies. And you've artificially closed the record, and then you reopen the record, and you create an artificial record, and those questions that are being asked of staff are inconsistent with the other two acting bodies' records, and you throw yourself open to some substantial legal challenges that are. I'm not the plumber in the operation, but you've created a dissimilar record by action, and I think it's an uncomfortable position to be in.
My thought was when we were doing that we were trying to allow the county to get this on the comments on the record, and that we reopened to allow them to do that so we could all have it on the record and have a similar, the same record.
But if we have the record in front of us of what Commissioner Handy has said, and we don't have the staff response to those questions, which are part of the record, then we don't have a complete record, and that's a terribly uncomfortable position to be drafting, final action in it.
Do we have any legal advice from down at that end of the table?
We're trying to figure it out.
Mayor?
I'm one of the Assistant County Councilors for Lane County, and one of the issues, obviously, is this is a legislative proceeding. It's not quasi-judicial, so it's not as fraught with risks for record information. You can base your decision on information that you get from just about anywhere. That's one of the problems with what you're dealing with here. That's not usually the case in a quasi-judicial proceeding. There's also the equation of if somebody comes into a hearing and dumps in information that your staff can respond to without adding a whole bunch of new evidence, just has explanation about where or what and how and why this is relevant or not relevant to this proceeding, I don't think that creates as much of a risk for appeal again as in a quasi-judicial arena where you start putting additional evidence into the record. So it may be possible for this document to be distributed with a short cover memo from staff that says either we can explain this in another arena, or here are some short answers to these questions based on what's already in the record in front of you, or here's how this relates or doesn't relate to this proceeding. So there's any number of ways that it could be handled without getting into a big debate about whether to reopen the record or not reopen the record.
Councilor Clark? Councilor Ortiz?
I think I'd like to move that the council record be held open to accept the staff, in the interest of good governance and transparency, that it be held open to accept the staff answers to Commissioner Handy's question.
Second.
Been seconded?
I'll second. Oh,
It's already been seconded? All those, yes, Councilor Ortiz?
well, I just have a question about this. So who's going to actually do the work?
To respond?
Yes,
He's asking county.
County.
the county will, because, you know, we have a rule for the city that we can't ask our staff to do anything more than 2 hours unless we get a support from the rest of the council. So I just want to be cognizant of that. I mean, I hear very loud and clear from John yesterday that we're going through a lot of processes, and our staff's tables are full. And so I'm just curious, is the county going to be doing this work then, to answer his questions?
Yes.
Okay. That's, okay.
They were
then I'll
asked
support
by
it.
the county. He was asking staff. His
Okay,
staff is the
okay. Just clarifying for my...
That's a good clarification.
Okay, Eugene City Council, you have a motion before you to keep the hearing, the record open. The record open.
Until the staff
Gives
provides.
me-
Solely for the purpose of receiving the staff answers to Commissioner Handy's questions.
Can you do that?
So do we need to have the record open to a time specific then?
The specificity of upon the submission of staff's response is specific.
Sufficient? Okay. All those in favor, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I get it all? Any in opposition? No. Okay, that passes, so the record remains open until we get the answers. There you go, Sid.
Well, what I will do is I'll entertain a very specifically similar motion to Councilor Clark. So if, I didn't hear a motion, so.
would entertain.
Okay, so moved in second. All right. We'll put the dentist's tools away because I know this is like pulling teeth. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Commissioner?
Thank you, and I just want to acknowledge that I did hear some people are feeling uncomfortable, and I'm sure also many would agree that this will move very quickly at the end, and we want to have as much good information in front of us to make decisions when the decisions come. So thank you for fielding these questions, and I will get off this memo so everyone could look at it later.
Commissioner Handy, I just really tie it up tight here. I just want to be sure that the commissioners have also agreed to close the record when you receive the answers to that question.
Well, and I would say upon receipt of the memo from his staff responding, that was just to mirror the two motions that were made by the city council. Upon receipt of that memorandum, upon that date, the records will be closed.
That would be the motion to close the record upon receipt of the information so that it parallels with the other jurisdictions. Thank you, and welcome, Commissioner Fleener.
Thank you very much. Apologize for the
You're
delay.
back as the chair.
Yes, thank you.
Do you need a vote?
You have
Motion.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Question to staff. Our action is to pass motions moving the first reading and setting a second reading for July 7th. My question would be to staff, is that sufficient time for staff to respond to the comments that have been made by Commissioner Handy?
Celia Barry, Lane County. Yes, I think we can respond. Whether or not it will be to Commissioner Handy's satisfaction, I'm not sure. I can offer a response now if, as a preliminary response, if you like.
I'm hearing no's. So hearing that, then I would make a motion to move the first reading, setting the second reading for July 7th, 2010 for ordinance PA 1272, leaving the record open until July 7th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to hold a public hearing. Any further discussion on this? Leaving the record open, having a public hearing and keeping the record open. Any further discussion on this?
There was no.
See no further discussion. The chair will now call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimous, 4-0. With Commissioner Dwyer excused. Thank you very much.
Mayor. Kind of a process lesson learned. If Rob had actually said his comments right after mine,
Right?
this wouldn't have been a problem. So next time we do a joint hearing with joint records open, let's all be cognizant, and maybe staff can help remind us that we need to do all of that up front and then sequentially close everything. And then
We won't have that.
I wasn't aware of this rule either. So in the future, maybe we can avoid that complication.
Thank you for that comment. All right, second item on our agenda today is the Metro Plan, Work Plan Report, and that's the city managers and the county administrator, planning directors.
Actually, we have a substitute. Mr. Kent Howe is far more able than some of us on this issue, so he'll take over and lead it.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councilors and commissioners. This is a very brief comment that I have. Since our last update to the JCO, the jurisdictions are continuing doing their work on updating and moving methods to reflect the work that's addressing the joint elected official subcommittee recommendation, implementation of House Bill 3337, the necessary conforming amendments to the Metro Plan, and housekeeping acts. In early May, I reported to the board, gave them an update of our progress. I believe Springfield staff did that as well. The Springfield Council in early May, and I understand that Eugene is scheduling that for this summer. The jurisdictions have completed what's required by House Bill 3337 legislation. Now we're working to identify where a Metro Plan needs new language to reflect two separate area boundaries, and if expanded, where. On the back page of the package materials that we have for this agenda item, you'll see the planning directors are working to align and, where possible, combine the processes to meet the requirements of House Bill 3337, the JDO subcommittee recommendations to require conforming amendments and housekeeping amendments. In summary, we're planning on coming back to you in September with policy questions that we need your input on how to process this with as few joint elected hearings as possible.
Wonderful. Right. Are there questions? Comments? Commissioner Handy.
Thank you. And again, my intent today has been to be as concise as possible. So I prepared some comments, and I will submit these because I know Mr. Howe will have more conversation and in-depth feedback at the county, and we'll have work sessions on this. But part of why I want to read the comments is so our partners know where some of the commissioners are thinking about this. So regarding the report, the background statement should include a statement recognizing that Lane County commissioners have an interest in having their own refinement area specific plan as an element of the Metro Plan to address their jurisdiction over the lands inside the UGB but outside the city limits, specifically the River Road, Santa Clara unannexed areas. Regarding the issue statement, we'd like to know exactly what does being about 80% complete with conceptual draft language mean, which work plan tasks are complete, which are in progress, which are yet to be done, It's interesting that staff is claiming that they were surprised to learn from DLCD that earlier proposed edits regarding the UGB and two separate UGBs are insufficient, and that additional conforming language amendments will be necessary to comprehensively address the changes brought about by having separate UGBs. I recall hearing these comments from the public almost as soon as the first version of the proposed amendments were available, as early as 2008. The public was correct then, and I appreciate that DLCD stood firm on it. I agree that staff has not yet provided us with the proposed language that reflects the policy complexities embodied in the change from the UGBs. I want to know when we can expect the draft Metro Plan language that sufficiently addresses the policy changes and the implications resulting from implementation of House Bill 3337. If staff expects adoption before the end of the year, the adopting officials need access to a full set of materials with enough time for these recommended changes to be incorporated and vetted publicly. Staff's statement about being caught off guard regarding the necessity to consider policy language implications resulting from the abolishment of the Boundary Commission seems somewhat odd. The issue of the Metro Plan amendments meant to address exactly this issue was on the table as early as beginning of 2008. I'm not sure why staff hasn't addressed these concerns that have been addressed early on, and I'm hoping that we're not seeing a backtracking in response to these same concerns raised by the state. If the staff now intends to provide an overall plan, quotes, overall plan that addresses these issues at the September 30th JEO meeting, we need to consider these as decision makers. We need adequate time to review and discuss and recommend these changes to the overall plan. Last 2 points, as far as the work plan issues diagram, regarding the urban transition agreement, commissioners have not supported a new administrative process to address citizen concerns. We believe in the representative government, and we were interested in having these come to the commissioners. And second, the commissioners are looking for changes in the Metro Plan that recognize the unannexed areas in River Road and Santa Clara in the jurisdiction of the county, and which consider this area as a sub-area within the Metro Plan. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes.
Well, I got questions, maybe.
Sure.
In both of the situations we've just gone through, Commissioner Handy is speaking as if the Board of Commissioners is united in this questioning of things. Are these your personal beliefs, or is this the representation of the board? That's what I'd like to know. I mean, is the whole board worried about what happens within the urban growth boundary outside the city limits, or is that just yours?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's concern by at least the majority of the board that we need to have some sort of representational process that has yet to be identified as we transition from urban into the rural areas that are within the UGB. And I think that I've made no confusion that I'm very interested in a process by which we develop that allows these folks in the UGB to have some sort of representational process. Because at this point in time, the county has essentially given the authority to the city through an IGA, but those poor folks in the UGB do not have the ability to vote for the city councilors. So their only recourse is to go to the county commissioners, but we've already given that authority to you folks. So we have a little bit of a situation here that we would like to see resolved in a fair and transparent manner. So that's what we're looking at. How can we resolve that?
Mayor?
Yes.
This is a point that gets brought up and discussed oftentimes at Santa Clara community organization meetings that I've been to, and it's a very good point that needs to be addressed. My understanding is that the county board recently had discussions about taking back some of those services and with regard to 190 agreements. Have you made any progress on that? Have you come to agreement on how you'd like to proceed?
I believe we've scheduled a workshop to take a look at the process by which this will actually be executed, knowing that within the language in the IGA, if the county does serve notice, an individual jurisdiction could immediately the next day say, okay, it's yours. So we need to be prepared in the event that you folks decide to do that. And we certainly don't want to be left out there in no man's land. So we will be exploring all of the different legal aspects, hopefully have some conversations with you all to see what we can do working together to improve the process. Because we certainly don't want to have any more of this. We want to be cooperative and be sensitive to the folks in the UGB.
I just want to point out that, of course, I've been hearing about this for a decade or more, and I think it's a 40-year issue, so it's not new. I just want to be sure if we talk about it that the conversation has not only to do with oversight or representation, but has to do with who pays for what services, and that's a very big discussion given everybody's financial situation. So it's more than a jurisdictional or representative discussion. It is really about who bears the burden of providing the services and how will those be paid for. Yeah.
Well, the board is cognizant of that, and we're sensitive to that since we are also struggling financially. And we do understand that if we do take over the planning and building permit, that there will be a cost to the county. We obviously are aware of that, acutely aware of that. So hopefully we can, through a creative process, come up with a solution that will best fit both jurisdictions and represent the better interests of the citizens. And I think this is where the board is coming from. We just want to explore these things as we have the record open. And it's been a long process. It doesn't have to be done overnight, but at the same time, at least from my perspective, and all of the folks in Santa Clara and now the Cedar Beach area in Florence, who are experiencing the same process that occurred in Santa Clara back in the 80s, is now happening to the folks in the Cedar Beach because of the lack of clarity within the language. So hopefully as we move this forward, we will be able to gain some clarity for some of these other cities who are having the same situation. And again, I think Commissioner Handy does speak on behalf of the majority of the board's desire to move in that direction. But how we get there, we're not really sure. Sure. Is that, Commissioner Sorensen, your evaluation? A head nod. Commissioner Stewart?
Well, I'd just like to state that those comments weren't brought before the board for official approval as the board's comments today, so I'd like to make that for the record.
That is correct.
I would say that we've had multiple conversations at the board with lots of different discussions, and that was, my understanding why we've had this item on the agenda is that the Metro, us as a group, the joint elected officials, have been working on the Metro plan and how do we move forward with it. Staff has reported where we're at with it, and so these are, I guess, additional comments from, the other commissioners that are here. But I would say that I wasn't privy to these comments, and I wouldn't represent them as mine at this point.
Bill?
Councilor Clark.
You mentioned, Commissioner, the desire to have either a corrected or an updated or a different sort or a better or a new refinement plan for both of these areas. Is that something that you're intending to have the county staff prepare?
The sole intent today, given knowing how short these meetings are and how important they are to all of us, was to just catch folks up to speed with some of the things we've discussing, and so that we don't have a rush at the 11th hour. I know none of us like that all of a sudden we have a decision. Right. I know not everyone is like you who's glued to watching county commissioner meetings.
I barely have a life.
So it's just an attempt to raise some issues so everyone's on the same page. And our theme at the Board of Commissioners is early and often to have these conversations and bring people into the loop so there's no surprises.
Councilor Simmons?
If this is going to be an issue that's developing, the River Road, Santa Clara, and the other areas where we have that interface, is part of that discussion in what Mayor Piercy said, I think we should very definitely have those cost factors part of the discussion out front, because the taxpayers in Springfield and Eugene and Lane County have an interest in how much money is being spent by those respective jurisdictions in that process. So if the county's going to take it over, or their attempt to take it over after they did the IGA years ago, that now those cost parameters should be publicly discussed.
Yes.
So that the public knows what it means.
Yes.
And so it's going to cost a substantial amount of money. And if the county's going to bring that bag to the table, then they best go get the leprechaun and bring that pot of gold to the table, because there hasn't been a demonstrated ability or desire to pay that. Your control question is very clear, as we experienced in the Springfield issues, but the reality of how we're going to get there is an extremely important part, and I think we have a very important role as elected officials to communicate to the public that what those costs and if there are time constraints. We can turn a building permit very quickly in Springfield. Our record is clear on that. If we look at what it would take in the terms of doing it through the county, it's going to cost the developer, the homeowner, and private and taxpayers a lot of money to do it. And so it's going to take more time, and that adds cost. And so in our recovery mode, if we don't have an easy pathway there, we're inhibiting growth in this area, which is going to negatively impact everybody in the process. So if you're going to come with that power thing, bring the box, or at least discuss what they are.
Mr. Sorensen?
I just wanted to say that, first of all, we have discussed this issue many, many times at our board, and so this is, I think, good to get it on the on the agenda for this group. Secondly, from the standpoint of efficiency, one thing we're looking at is whether providing these services for unincorporated areas within the metropolitan area, for places like River Road or Santa Clara or Thurston or Glenwood or any other unincorporated area within the Eugene and Springfield metro area, is it more efficient to do it through the county, or is it more efficient to do it through the city? Now, historically, we've had data presented, not recently, but historically we've had data showing that it would be cheaper to have it done by cities. And one of the rethinks that I'm going through as an advocate for having it done by whomever it could be done by as efficiently as possible, and currently I still think it's the cities, but one way to look at all this is in the context of what is going on with the fiscal picture of Oregon's cities and counties, namely that county is had more employees 20 years ago than it has now. Eugene had more employees 7 years than it does now. Springfield, I don't know what your growth or loss rate has been relative to your population increase, but the trend is that fiscally Oregon's government is shrinking relative to its population. So if that's true, we have to really be open to big creative ideas of how to provide these services. I know our fire folks have been very creative. They've been talking about doing a giant district that goes from the furthest western part of the metropolitan area to the furthest eastern part, and just having an entire district to cover that. So being creative on how we provide these services is really important, and we may be looking at things that are currently beyond the expectation of a lot of people around this table about what government's needed and what government can we afford. So I think we have to be really open to these concerns. And then it's always a concern about what do we do with people who
are now down to 30% of the county population, namely the unincorporated population is down to only 30%. And you look at that in historic terms, 1851, 100% of Lane County's population was in the county and 0 were in cities. Now it's 70% are in cities and only 30% are in unincorporated Lane County. So the trend is towards more and more in cities as a percentage of the total. So, you know, what they're doing in other parts of the country is they're shutting down cities and counties. They're just merging them. They're merging Miami-Dade, that's a city and a county. San Francisco, it's a city and a county. Las Vegas, Henderson, and the rest of Clark County is one government, or substantially one government. So a lot of consolidation going on as communities see the fiscal ramifications of having three principal law enforcement agencies, 3 principal planning agencies, 3 principal public works agencies. So there's a lot of people concerned about that inefficiency.
Commissioner Fleeting.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Sorensen's statements are ringing very true. As we are seeing the county revenue stream ratcheting down, and the question of relevancy. What is the relevancy of county government, specifically Lane County government? We're grappling with this as we see the timber payments going away possibly. We're seeing this as the state revenue forecast is getting worse and worse. We see this as the property values may be dropping, and thus the property tax collections may be ramping down. So the relevancy of the county becomes an issue, and I think that we need to start thinking in terms of a bigger, broader picture of perhaps the municipal-county merger, as Commissioner Sorensen was referring to. Councilor Simmons' statements about we need to address the costs, and this is going to be part of our workshop, that we really do want to know what the costs are. And it's not just about costs as far as providing the building permits and the land use process, but it's also the cost of not having representational government, the lack of trust, the lack of faith. So we have a balance to do here. It's not just totally about financial costs, it's also about the trust of the citizens. So the workshop is going to be very interesting, and I hope that when we get to that point, we will certainly invite all of the stakeholders, the city councilors, to attend, or at least to watch and see the interactions, because I don't think we're going to make a decision in a vacuum. This is going to be, we're all in this together, and hopefully we're going to make a decision that is going to, again, benefit the citizens specifically. So thanks for pointing that out, Councilor Simmons.
Yes, go ahead.
For the record, I don't have a lot of time to watch the Board of Commissioners on television. The city of Springfield does pay the phone bill, and so our phones work pretty well. And I know this has been a concern, but yet my commissioner nor the other commissioners have not picked up the phone and made a phone call really to sit down and talk about maybe what are some of the issues that we can work on together. In fact, what we constantly hear from is just through staff or secondhand. I know Mayor Piercy and I have been meeting on a regular basis since she's been mayor, and prior to that, Mayor Tory. And part of that is continuing to work together. We've always had an invitation for the board chair from the Board of Commissioners to come to our monthly breakfast. That continues to be open. And I got to tell you that, frankly, I think we could work much better in a much better, more progressive way if we just pick up the phone once in a while and call each other and say, hey, you know what? There's an issue here. It's bugging us. And what can we do to solve this instead of airing the dirty laundry out here in the public like that seems to be constantly happening? It doesn't get us anywhere. So I have an open invitation, any of the commissioners. I'm more than happy to go. If you want to call, something's on your mind, that's great. I will call you as well, because I believe we're going to get much further along, especially on these agreements. I understand your issues here, and I understand them pretty well about where you want to go here. But I also think that there's going to be a constant give and take. I think we can get there. But if you just really express, instead of an open meeting, which is fine. I mean, that's a transparency issue. But if you want to have a phone call prior to that and say, you know what, how does your council feel? Where do you feel that this is going to happen. If we can come up with this and a give and take, and I got to tell you, I think we would be much further along in solving these challenges than where we are today.
I've got Councilor Clark, and I'll call on you in just a minute, too.
Thank you.
I guess what I would like to add to this conversation is I actually think it's pretty heartening that we're having real substantial issues around our JEO table, as opposed to at one time we would all show up and wonder why we were here. So I do feel better about that. That doesn't mean that things are necessarily easier. One thing that I would find helpful, and I'm speaking for all three bodies, is I think we have limited time together. So it would really be good in our case if any proposal or asking for staff work or anything of real substance, that you vetted it at home first and know that you have that you're speaking for your body as opposed to your individual counselor or commissioner, because I just think that makes it easier. We know when it's said, it's coming, you talked about it, you're putting this out for us to consider from your whole body, and I just think that would be helpful to us, and I think it would be helpful for us to do that we don't bring something up here that we haven't talked about and doesn't speak for the Eugene City Council, the same for the Springfield. I just think that allows us to know that when something gets asked, it is coming from an entire body, and therefore it merits the kind of time and attention and work and cost that it'll take. So I want to ask us all to think about it. I just think it'll make all of our work easier. Councilor Clark and then Commissioner Flynn.
I was really happy to hear the comments from the two of you, Commissioners. Last night at the council meeting, or yesterday at the council meeting, I was able to log on to Councilor Zelenka's computer there and show a website that I believe was Partnership for Rural America, which shows the county payments over the next several years as they're scheduled to diminish, and kind of shared for a moment with the Eugene Council just kind of the financial state that the county's looking at over the next couple of years. And so I'm hoping that we're going to have, and I'm going to be putting out a poll, that we're going to have more conversations at our council level about the impacts that that's going to have on the county and what's that mean for city residents. And as you were bringing up, what's that mean for the nature of local government? Because I think it's going to impact all of us, and we got to be well prepared for that. But that's kind of the substance around the questions I asked earlier about the refinement plan and the 190 agreements, is because I thought it was kind of interesting to hear you adding additional and new expenses to the county at a time when we're having some real challenges about its own relevance at the time. So I found those comments interesting, and I'll look forward to the discussion. To tag on to what Mayor Lyken said, I too would welcome you and to establish more of a two-way, regular, ongoing communication about some of the other important things that we're doing together. When we had our workshops the other day for our Envision Eugene process and our House Bill 3337 compliance, one of the things that I brought up was to make sure that staff's checking in with the commissioners on a frequent basis about some of the things that we're developing with Envision Eugene, to make sure that we're not going down a road that some of you may have concerns over. So I'm really hopeful, and I guess I'd like to extend the invitation to please communicate frequently with us about that process as we go along, because as Commissioner Handy mentioned earlier, I'd hate to see us get to the 11th hour and have some kind of concerns over that we weren't able to identify early as we go through this process through the rest of the year. So I'd invite you to keep abreast of what we're doing there and help us out. Thanks.
Commissioner Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. With respect to Mayor Lyken's representation that we are actually airing dirty laundry, I tend to take offense to that, particularly from the perspective that this conversation has needed to be taken place in the public. It's been 30 years that it hasn't, and doing it during a monthly breakfast of the two mayors and the chair doesn't really work. Apparently it hasn't. So, if this is airing dirty laundry, it's something that really needed to be aired a decade or two ago. So this is the process which we call transparency, where the public is watching. We're talking about some really difficult subject matter that does not have an easy resolution. And I don't call this airing dirty laundry. I call this representational democracy. As far as whether or not the Board of County Commissioners are representing the body when we speak, we each have 20% vote, as each of you counselors have your percentage vote. We've had multiple discussions on the urban transition. We have not had a particular motion to effectuate an action, but there is a consensus, or at least a understanding that something needs to be done. And this is the process that we're engaged in, is addressing that issue, that something needs to be done. We're not really sure what can be done because of the Metro Plan being such a convoluted instrument. And I've stated this publicly, it's a Frankenstein. And trying to deal with this Frankenstein by putting new appendages on or taking old appendages off, I don't think is going to get to the essence of the problem. My recommendation publicly is to get rid of the Metro Plan, have each jurisdiction have their own comp plan so we can tailor-make it, but unfortunately the costs are prohibitive, so we have to deal with this Metro Plan. So it's complicated, and it's difficult, and it would be a lot easier if we just met, the three of us, and talk about it. But I think the hard part is to get together as a group and really address the issues and do it in open view of the public. This is where the rubber hits the road right now, today.
Councilor Taylor.
Thank you. First, I have to apologize for that meeting early, the way things are looking. But I want to say I agree with Commissioner Fleenor. And as speaking only for myself, not for the Eugene City Council, I think any council, any of us can say what we think here without consulting everyone else. Otherwise, if we consulted and we had one opinion, then we just need to send one person to a meeting, and we could all be away mowing our lawns, which is what I think.
Thank you.
Well, I just want to call on Councilor Ortiz in just a minute. I just want to clarify what I'm saying. But I'm not saying that everybody, what I'm trying to express is the same thing we already apply to our council, which is, of course, everybody has the right to their opinion and express their points of view. But when you are asking for something on behalf of your city for information, then you need to be sure that you've got the majority of your council or commissioners that want that information and are going to want to use it. That's all. Councilor Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. So this conversation may be a little bit uncomfortable for some of the folks that aren't maybe aware of the cultural differences that we have within our little UGB here. So, it may seem like we're, that Commissioner Handy has brought up a subject that, needed to be vetted more, but it sounds like you guys have discussed it a lot. I also represent that part of the community, the folks that are in the city, and I've heard this a lot from them, so I'm glad to see some ownership finally from the county commissioners, and whatever comes of that is fine with me, but I just need to, as I've said before in public meetings, as long as it doesn't cost us anything, because those are principally taxpayers. And so the challenge is, how do we give them what they need within that budget, so to speak. So, it may seem uncomfortable for some, but, I don't necessarily want to apologize, but I do think that, I guess, if not here, then where? And so I'm just, just trying to, let's move on. I guess is really what I want to say.
Well, on that note, unless there's another comment or any other question around the Metro Plan work, we see that we have a lot of work to do on the Metro Plan work plan. So we'll move on to the next item.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Before I lose a quorum, can we go back to this issue real quick?
Yes, please do.
We have a procedural issue with respect to the ordinance number PA 1272 that we voted to keep the record open, but I need to read the actual ordinance and then have a motion to the effect that we move to the first reading and set the second reading. So if you will indulge me. First reading and setting the second reading and public hearing, ordinance number PA 1272 in the matter of amending the Eugene Springfield Metropolitan Area Transportation Plan, Trans Plan, to adjust the planning period from year 2015 to year 2027, to remove completed projects from the project lists, to make related amendments to the Eugene-Springfield Metropolitan Area General Plan, and adopting a servability clause, second reading and deliberation, hopefully for 7/7/2010. I need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move the first reading and set the second reading. We've already held the record open to August 7th, July 7th, 2010. Any further discussion? Chair will now call the question. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 4-0 with Commissioner Dwyer excused. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Okay. Item number 3, to follow up on the economic development strategies, and that is City Manager Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll enter this with a little bit of trepidation based on our... As we all are very aware, since 2008, our region has been significantly impacted by what has become a global economic recession. This impact spurred our regional economic development discussions beginning last year and resulted in a summit that we held this past November. We last met in February and approved the Regional Economic Development Plan, which focuses on building our next economy. We're here today to provide an update on work currently underway to support the 6 strategies outlined in the plan. I want to emphasize that implementing the strategy takes a much broader partnership of institutions and organizations than just the 3 JEO jurisdictions. 10 different organizations are leading 17 individual actions. Jeff, Gino, and I are very pleased and encouraged with the cooperation and leadership of these 10 organizations. The individual actions are a combination of ongoing work that is now set in the context of the Regional Economic Development Plan and new actions implemented in direct response to the JEO's work. Here's a short overview of the progress on each of the 6 strategies. Business expansion and retention. The strategy is currently focused on 4 actions. First, creating a one-stop business assistance center led by LCC's Small Business Development Center. This would be through physical centers throughout the county and a web-based system. Planning group is formed and a marketing consultant is on board. Second action is a Small Cities and Rural Initiative led by Lane County to target those areas and make sure they have needed services and a full-time staff is on board. Third action is an expanded small business assistance led by the Eugene Chamber with ombudsman-type services. And a new ongoing position is anticipated for the Chamber's multifaceted program. Finally, business financing through existing programs from LCOG and the cities of Springfield and Eugene. Second strategy around entrepreneurial infrastructure is currently focused on 3 actions. The Chamber is expanding their successful Angel Network and annual conference to further stimulate regional investor interest to work with and fund even more emerging enterprises. Also led by the Chamber is work to create business and industry clusters and association. And the microenterprise development led by EDEV continues their work with financial support from the 3 jurisdictions. Under workforce development, currently 4 strategies are underway, all led by Lane Workforce Partnership to match training to industry needs. And also as part of their ongoing work, they're getting youth needed work experience, they're enhancing workforce readiness and training laid-off workers and low-income adults for in-demand jobs. With respect to land and physical infrastructure, as part of this strategy, the cities of Eugene and Springfield are in various stages of completing comprehensive land assessments. Eugene is in Part 2 called Envision Eugene and will consider land supply together with economic development goals. Springfield is forming local economic development objectives and strategies for discussions of land supply, redevelopment, and the urban growth boundary. The economic identity strategy has 3 actions in progress. Travel Lane County is leading a robust marketing and branding effort. The first planning meeting occurred at the end of May, and they're also leading an exploration of a major indoor track center with the University of Oregon. Additionally, the cities of Eugene and Springfield continue to work on downtown vibrancy as part of this strategy to attract and retain business investment and a talented workforce. Finally, the 6th strategy is targeted industries, which there are currently 2 actions underway. Metro Partnership is lead on identifying the basic needs of targeted industries and developing a strategy. It's currently gathering information now. And Lane County is working on potential clean tech projects. The City of Eugene has been helping Lane County with a few other specific projects also related to clean tech. There's a full progress update as attachment B to your packet, and we're available to answer questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Manager Reese, thank you for the report. Excellent. Very good job as far as the Regional Prosperity Economic Development Plan. All of these are really great, but the issue we have is that the global tide has gone out. The national tide has gone out. And we have, how many, 3,000 counties in this country?
3,106, Mr. Chairman.
3,106 counties. And
But who's counting?
How many cities do we have?
Several.
14,000.
13,000 cities, and we're all vying for the same thing, and that's new jobs. And what I read here, 1 through 6, any city, any county would have virtually the same presentation. So what are we going to do that's substantially different or significant that is going to take us out of this the bigger basket and put us on our own? That we are so unique that people are driven here, that they really want to relocate here. I assume this is the economic identity part, but out of the 3,000 counties and 13,000 cities, why come here?
I think it's a good question, and just offering a couple thoughts, and others may want to weigh in. I think there's a couple pieces when we talk about economic development. Part of it is creating the basic infrastructure on which whomever chooses to be here can be here. Mm-hmm. And that really is the same for a lot of places around the country. It's basic physical infrastructure, it's entrepreneurial infrastructure, it's workforce infrastructure, it's all of those kinds of things that you really need in order to actually have somebody show up and prosper.
But once you start putting that infrastructure in, does that not limit our options? I mean, here we have this beautiful infrastructure, but we missed the target.
Well,
the company says that's not what I'm interested in.
I don't think so. So, for example, if you don't have a workforce, a trained workforce available, it won't matter. People aren't going to show up. If you don't have a place for them to locate, it won't matter. They're not going to show up. And then I do think it gets to your question of, so given some of the basic infrastructure, then what do we do with that? Mm-hmm. And part of what the subcommittee talked a lot about, and I remember several members of that group talking about the identity of who we are and how do we then want to build on that infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a second piece of the equation. But without that basic infrastructure, which really is the same across the board as far as having some of those basics, there's nothing to build on. So I don't know if others would want to weigh in. So.
I mean, I look at the infrastructure as sewer, water, sidewalks, gutters, bicycle paths.
I think it's that, but I think it's land, it's workforce, it's an entrepreneurial infrastructure if you really do want to draw those kinds of folks. The university provides part of that infrastructure. So yes, and then I think there's the other pieces to it.
Councilor Lundberg.
I completely agree with the infrastructure, because what I look at is what is our role here. Our role is we have a governmental role, and how can we be helpful in terms of that governmental role. And sometimes it is something as simple as streets and the place to build a building. But a lot of times, my personal experience is I need to have the trained workforce that I can hire someone who's actually trained to do the job. Even if I'm offering a family wage job, need that trained workforce. But that's not the job of the business necessarily to have the training that may take years to do, but it can be assisted from the government perspective in terms of what kind of training we have available that would give you that workforce that you want to have. And then the other side is to help the businesses be able to match up with that trained workforce. and to match up with them in terms of what do you want in the way of a trained workforce, so that when we put money into programs or we put money into whatever we want to call that infrastructure, which in my mind is allowing people either to come here and be trained, to have them trained and know that the jobs are here, is how do we do that? Because outside of the employment department or Craigslist or wherever, or tapping into every college that is you're on your own sometimes in terms of finding qualified applicants. So that to me is where we could use a consortium that we have that helps people have a clearinghouse, which I think is part of, I saw in here, is how do you help employers so you're not spending all your time trying to find someone qualified and in the meantime go without an employee, because I think there's jobs out there, but it seems to be a common thread at the moment is trying to find someone that actually is qualified to do the job. So we have a high unemployment rate, but we also have the need for workers out there that is going unmet. So I like what I see in the report and would love to see a little more of the trades represented in terms of you go forward and form it's not a committee, I know it's named in here is to form something, but to have the trades, because many times they aren't entry-level jobs, they're skilled jobs, and those people are harder to find. So is to have the trades represented really well, because that's where you have a lot of workers that you can bring to a community or support employment in the community.
Thank you for that. I guess I would just like to make the comment that I think we do have a lot of pieces of infrastructure in place to build on, so I don't think we have to necessarily wait for the infrastructure. We have to figure out how to leverage what we've got as well as build more. I think the one-stop service center is great. I think a lot of driving people to that and making them know that that's available to them, especially when they're in the sort of beginning stages of getting their businesses launched, is having that connection and those pieces in place that help them get to the next place, I think are really important. And in terms of the targeted industries piece here, where you talk on clean tech developments, I would really like more detail on what that is, what people are really thinking about. I'd also like for us, or in combination with what you've already got going, to think about what direction would we give the Metro Partnership if we were going to give them direction. What is it we would really like them to emphasize and do, and how much of that are they already doing? And are there things they're not doing that we would like to give them the message that we would like them to do, and we like to give them that message as a group, because we're all part of paying for that service. And I guess I just also want to be sure that when we are working on all of this, that we are looking at it through the lens of the principles that we established about what we're looking for to grow in our area. So I appreciate what's here, more detail, how we're moving along. I'd also appreciate that. And did I see Councilor Cheese?
Yeah, I was kind of debating whether or not to say anything, but I guess I will. So I do appreciate this is good work. I just perused it a little bit, but I didn't see where the university and all that they're doing is kind of spoken to, and I think that they're doing a lot. We just went to the, what was it, the Loki Lab we went to. I mean, it was just an amazing thing that they did, and all the partnerships that they do with the other universities and all the businesses that have come out of there. I think it's really positive to somehow tie that in if possible. I know that you have a representative on this technical advisory group. The other thing about in my mind's eye, though, the Lane Workforce Partnership looks at, and I don't know how much, when I look at what they do, to me that's more the blue collar work that is in our community, and maybe I'm wrong. I know that blue collar kind of rolls over into white collar at some point, and that's good too. But when I think about the trades, I mean, a lot of the young men that I know go looking for work, and like Monaco and those places are gone. And so like they look at the university, for instance, and all the subcontractors are from out of the area. The contractor is local, so it's local business, and those dollars are here, in our community. But So I really do appreciate the comments about the trades, because I do think that isn't showcased enough. And I think that we need to put a little bit more energy into, because those are family wage jobs. And I think that that's really important, that if you're not college bound, we want to encourage our children to go to college, but if you're not necessarily not successful. And so I think we need to find a way to showcase those opportunities for our youth also.
Commissioner Clean?
I will defer to Councilor Clark, since I would be taking a second round.
Gentlemen, great work. Appreciate all the follow-up and staff's hard work on this. I was pleased to be able to serve on the subcommittee for this. I think the principles we developed and the work that kind of started the staff work here was headed in the right direction, and I like what's come of it. I like the idea that many of the focused industry sectors are or have some touch on manufacturing, because I think that's a critical piece as we move forward, that we have to be producing something and bringing in more capital than we're exporting with regard to the things that take place here for economic security and our own economic independence. But I was actually kind of surprised to see a lack of things around production of agriculturally based products. I think that we have a real opportunity. Some of the success stories that we've seen around agriculturally based, adding some level of in the manufacturing process to agricultural products is an area where we have a real opportunity to do two things and touch on two of those principles that we've talked about. Strengthen our own regional economic independence and to add value to things that bring and establish an identity for our community. So I'd just like to see us really focusing in on manufacturing and agricultural-based things as well.
Actually, I think it was KLCC had a big thing on it yesterday on the things that have been successful and have moved on, been bought out because they were successful. But I think that is a piece that we really have a lot of experience and future potential in, and a lot of
it's healthy.
Huge amount of interest. Yep.
Yeah.
Alan?
I think this plan is okay as it goes. It's very nuts and bolts oriented. The one thing that's lacking in it for me is it doesn't seem very forward looking. It seems backward looking almost, and it doesn't seem to have very much emphasis on positioning us in the future economy, which I firmly believe is going to be around a lot of the green technologies and the green products that are coming. I think the economy is taking a shift. It's a Titanic, so it takes a while, but I think this doesn't have a clear vision about where we're tacking to and what we're trying to get at. I think some of the businesses that were identified and the sectors that were identified in the Sustainable Business Initiative that the mayor did are good examples of areas where we should be focusing, because I think those are the real emerging ones. And I think every economic development strategy should focus on making sure that the companies that are here prosper and can grow and make sure that they stay here, but also needs to be looking towards the future. And if I were to redo this, I would shift a lot more focus into that area.
The Titanic.
Commissioner Fleener.
The economy is the Titanic, yeah.
I was wondering what you meant by that.
It was a purposeful metaphor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From my perspective, and I think that a lot of economists agree, that the private sector is where the job creation has to take place. The public sector can maybe prime the pump, but that's not where true job creation starts. So I'm very much interested in focusing on how do we get more private jobs here. Then, of course, the discussion about the movement of private capital in the international market, where we know that it's a very fluid and dynamic process where private capital moves in and out of marketplaces, in and out of countries, states, and counties based upon the possibility of success. And success is profitability, making money. And they basically look at taking advantage of the public infrastructure and any kind of tax giveaways that the community is willing to provide, and then use that to catapult their dividends up. And then, like the several instances where we've had this happen to us, they cut and run once their tax subsidy is run out. So I feel that we need to be careful about taking the hook, line, and sinker whenever one of these large companies come to town and try to court us. And as Commissioner Dwyer would probably say, it's a race to the bottom. How much are we willing to give away? And a lot of these giveaways, like we found with Hynix, are somewhat invisible until after they left. And then all of a sudden we go, oh my God, we've been taken to the cleaners. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. So I think we need to be very careful not to buy into this paradigm again. It's happened several times now in Lane County. I see that we need to focus on retention of businesses and jobs. Right now, we need to really help these struggling business people out in Lane County. We need to keep them here. We need to focus on how do we remove the impediments from government. Because studies have shown that those government entities that have the least regulatory environment have the greatest production of jobs and economy. That's not to say that we need to reduce regulations, but there is a correlation between successful economy and reduced regulations. I call that red tape. So as I said before, get rid of the bureaucratic red tape as much as we can. Let businesses prosper on their own. We need to focus on removing impediments and give them a helping hand whenever possible. Focus on retention, on growing local businesses, and helping people succeed locally. I'm not sure what we're going to be able to do on a national or an international basis because, like I said, the tide's gone out, and we've got thousands of counties, thousands of cities, hundreds of countries all competing. And like any other open market, it's going to be based upon least cost labor, the least cost real estate, the least regulations. All of those things are going to effectuate whether or not a big company moves to Lane County or any other place. So we need to be very cautious as we move ahead, but focus on the businesses today. Those are solid.
I want to say I think overall the work is good, and I really appreciate the hard work everyone does. I think we've been trending toward a green economy now for a while. I know that I owned and operated a green business back in the 1990s, and was pretty proud of that, and was recognized nationally for the work that I did. And so I think we've been trending that way. And in fact, I think when Springfield adopted our drinking water, groundwater protection program back in 1999, that banned certain types of chemicals coming to our city. That position that you either had to be a more green business or you just didn't cite there. And also I think it's just making sure we jump on the opportunities. I will say I believe the governor's election is going to be one of the most important we've seen in a long time because the governor is the economic development chief of the state, and that's one of their prime jobs, and that's going to be a very, very important election, I think, for all of us to take a look at, and who's the best person to represent Oregon, I think, as far as economic development is concerned. Also, I've commented on this quite a bit. We're the second largest metro area in the state, and that's something we need to capitalize on. We have a lot of just great opportunities here, and I know that if Metro elects my old friend Tom Hughes, the former mayor of Hillsborough, who, by the way, has a relationship with every mayor and city manager up in that area, he's greedy. And he is. And I will tell you that from the land use standpoint, his philosophy is pretty growth and pretty pro-growth. And that's going to be an interesting election up there. And that's, again, I don't think that we have to think of ourselves competing with Portland. But think about who we're competing with anymore. We're competing with, name any international city. That's who we're competing with. And so as the second largest metro area in the state, great transportation access, first-rate education system, that's I think going to be one of the most important positions. And by the way, the lab you were talking about, Guess who had more visits at that lab from any city in the state? Hillsborough. Tom Hughes visited that lab I don't know how many times. And that's why they've become, in a sense, positioned themselves to become one of the major solar manufacturing capital of the state of Oregon. And so, but I think we just have to capitalize on the great resources we have here. And I agree with Alan. I mean, that is the trend. That's where we're going to go. We're going to continue going down that route. Nobody yet has identified, give me a firm definition of what green means.
I can help you out with that.
I'm sure you can, and I can help you, and I'm sure I have a definition, Cody's got a definition, Joe has a definition. We all have definitions of green economy, but I think overall, we have some incredible opportunities here to work together on this and to position ourselves, and I think we just need to capitalize on it and move forward.
Well, I just want to say that we share, all of us in this room, this location. And this location, as we've found out time and time again, is a really strong salesmanship for this, for locating here. And even though we struggle like everybody else, we still end up on the list of top places to locate small and larger businesses and top places for almost everything. I think we just need to leverage what we've got. And I just want to make a pitch for and to add for what you just said and what you just said. I mean, we have LCC, who's clearly with their downtown project go across the street is aiming at training thousands of young people for green jobs. We just need to be sure we're hooking what we're doing with what they're wanting to do. The University of Oregon, as you pointed out, they are the entrepreneurs. They are popping out businesses right and left, and we just got to be sure we can keep some of them here. So I think being able to keep the ones that start from here would be a big step in the right direction. So I think that green jobs is the right direction. There are other directions to go as well, and I think we stand with a lot of great, more than a lot of places with LCC and the University of Oregon and our entrepreneurs. I think we've got a lot going for us, but I do think we have to move, and we have to show people that we're interested and that we are aggressive in wanting to get the kind of jobs that we want to have in our community. So, Mike?
Mayor, I just want to say I concur that I think I've said in the subcommittee work that if that's our identity, to be the place where the green products of tomorrow are manufactured, that's wonderful. That's fantastic, because as long as we're making something and adding value to that process, that's to be our identity, that's fine. But with the level of unemployment we have, to steal from something I heard on the radio a few months back, I don't care much if they're green jobs, red, white, or blue jobs. I just think that what we need to be doing is looking at making sure that we're building the sort of model that allows for us to really tackle unemployment. And for me, I see the challenges that the county faces and that have been mentioned here today. I think we know that there's no magic bullet for that answer, for that problem. There's no federal or state solution in sight, and there's likely no local one that we're going to come up with other than the success of our own regional economy. I think that growing our tax base and growing our region's economy is one of the only ways we'll keep our governments functioning well and serving people the way they deserve it. So I think this is really, really important work, and I'm glad that you've done such a good job with it.
I agree with that. I just want to remind you that Tom McCall is the one who said we just don't have to go with any hussy who shows up.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's my statement.
Right. Yeah, I agree with both those statements, actually. But we even have a tagline where the green economy comes to grow. Could be our slogan. I travel a lot for business, and I talk to people, and they say, "Where are you from?" And I say, "I'm from Eugene." And universally, every single person says, "Wow, Eugene, that's a great place." And about half of them I say, "You been there?" And they say, "No, but I heard about it." And I think we underestimate what a great place this is to be. The Eugene-Springfield metro area is such a great place to come and be and live. And it is a competitive advantage that we have, and we need to exploit it. I don't disagree with what Commissioner Fleener said about the private sector creating jobs, with the caveat that it is in the small businesses where the jobs come. 80% of the jobs in the United States come from businesses that have less than 100 employees.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big part of the economic driver. But I sure am thankful for the public spending that has occurred over the last 2 years with Autzen Stadium, the basketball arena, the buildings at the U of O, the bridges, the federal courthouse, all the road work that we've been doing, LCC potentially going to build across the street. All that is public money, and I would shudder to think where we'd be in this economy if we didn't have that public infrastructure being built and that public infusion of money, because the private sector isn't there right now, and it's picking up all the slack. And if we hadn't had all of that public money spent on doing that, I think the economy would be in a deep recession.
Okay, anybody else? Well, okay, thanks, everyone. I think that ends our meeting for today.
Alan, I'll resist the urge to have a Keynesian economic model argument with you.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to go there too.